Hi everyone, welcome back for 15.2. We're looking at sums of arithmetic sequences and series. So today brings us a new formula. There are two, okay? I like to use the general formula just so that I don't have to make a choice when finding the sum for these sequences. Okay, so remember that the sum is adding together all of the terms and getting the total. So that's what your S sub n represents. Okay, it's the sum or the total of however many terms we're adding together. So let's take a look. So find the sum of this series, 12, 19, 26, ... 180. So the problem here is that we don't know how many missing terms there are in between 26 and 180. Okay, but we do know an a sub 1. We know that 180 is going to be our a sub n. We just don't know the n yet. And we can figure out our common difference by looking at the consecutive terms that we are given, 12 to 19. Our common difference would equal 7. Okay, so our first step in this problem is going to be to find our n. Now we're going to go back to our first formula for arithmetic sequences when we're finding a specific term. Okay, so we're going to use this formula from the other day because this holds all of the pieces that we need in order to solve for our n, because we have an a sub n, we have an a sub 1, and we have a common difference. So we can't quite jump into our sum formula because there's not anywhere to put in our common difference, and we don't have the sum. We're trying to find the sum here, so we would have too many unknowns in that formula. Okay, so plug that in. We're going to solve out this equation. We actually want to put in our a sub 1 here. So we get that n equals 25. Now, your n must always be a whole number. Okay, so if ever you solve for n and you get 25.5, we can't have that because we don't have half number terms. We have 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms, 4 terms, and so on. Now that we have n, we can actually find our sum. So step number 2 is find our sum. So we're going to use our sum formula. This is the new one that was introduced today. And we have all of the information that we need here. So we're finding the sum for 25 terms. We're going to plug that into our calculator exactly as it looks. And we're going to find that the sum for those 25 terms is 2,400. So this is our final answer. Let's try another one. Okay, now this is giving us the same information and it's asking us to do the same thing. It's just presented in a different way. So it has these addition signs rather than commas because it says find the sum. And when we find the sum, we add together all the terms. So it really is the same thing as saying this. Okay, so as always, step number 1 for this type of problem is going to be to find our n. So I have a last term, an a sub n. I have an a sub 1, but I don't know how many terms there are in total there. And I can find my common difference by looking at those consecutive terms. From negative 18 to negative 15 is a plus 3. So I'm going to solve this equation for my n. And now that I know how many terms there are, step number 2, I can find the sum. So the sum for those first 29 terms and I'm going to plug it into my calculator just as it looks, and the sum is 696. So the sum is my final answer. Okay, so now we're still finding the sum, but we're given some different information. This time I have the n, I have the last term, and I have the common difference. Pause your video and try and figure out what piece of information we do not have. Did you come up with we don't have a sub 1? So that's going to be our step number 1 here, is to find our first term. In order to find the sum, you need the first term, the last term, and the number of terms. So using our old formula, not our sum, we're going to plug in the information that we have, and we're going to solve this for a sub 1. So we get that a sub 1 is 120. Now that we have our first term, our last term, and the number of terms, we have everything necessary to find the sum. So the sum for those 16 terms is going to be set up like this. Plug it into our calculator. 2,880 is our final answer. All right, we have 2 your turn problems here. So I want you to pause your video, work out each one of these, and check them with the final answers that are written on the bottom. All of the worked out steps are on Google Classroom in the filled in Google Notes if you want to confer with those. Okay, we got one more type of problem and a your turn left to do here. So now we're going to be given the sum. That's what S sub n right here is. This is the sum. And we're being asked to find the first 3 terms. So this is a working backwards. So instead of finding the sum, you're using that. Now, if you're given the sum, you have to use the sum formula because that's the only place we have to plug it in. So we're having to use this guy here. We have nowhere else that we can use 430, and without 430, we don't have enough information to solve the problem. So we're going to plug that in. And what is it leaving us to find? This is leaving us to find the n. Well, the n is not the first 3 terms, but let's see where this takes us. Okay, so this is going to be n times, I'm going to work out 7 plus 79 over 2, which is 43. Whoops. Which is going to allow me to divide. Okay, so I get n equals 10. Remember, that always has to be a whole number. So how does this help me? Pause your video. Write down, how does this help me, having the n? Well, now that I know what n is, I know that a sub n of 79 is really a sub 10. And now that I know how many numbers are in between a sub 1 of 7 and a sub n of 79, I can figure out what my common difference is. And the common difference is the thing I'm going to need to get me from a sub 1 to a sub 2 to a sub 3, which is what the problem is actually asking us for. So our step 1 over here was finding n, because that was the only thing we could do with the information given. And now step number 2, we have to think about, well, what piece of information do we now need in order to find those first 3 terms? So we find out here that our common difference is 8. So now our third and final step, we're just going to apply that common difference starting with a sub 1 to get the next few terms. So if a sub 1 is 7, a sub 2 must be 15, and a sub 3 must be 23. Okay, here's a your turn of that type of problem for you to solve. The answers are on the bottom, so pause your video, work that out. Okay, make sure that you can get to that final answer. And if you have any questions about any part of this instructional video, you want to make sure